Therein lies Israel's strategic strength. Absent this sustained provocation, 43 years and counting, hatred might subside and peace may become a possibility. That's a danger Tel Aviv works hard to avoid. September the 12th also saw the release of a new report indicating that 2,066 new homes will be constructed in the West Bank as soon as the temporary freeze expires on September the 26th. Meanwhile, back in the US, Americans remain unaware of how many contracts for homeland security were awarded to Israeli firms or to firms owned by pro-Israelis. Nor do Americans realize how many homeland security outlays have been directed to Jewish community centers. That's all the more reason for Zionists, both Jewish and Christian, to create an uproar about an Islamic community center planned for construction 2 blocks from the 911 site in Manhattan. And all the more reason for a Christian Zionist preacher to designate the 9th anniversary of 911 as International Burn a Quran Day at his 50-member church. The Quran gambit gained global attention, stoked by a media dominated by Jewish Zionists. High-profile political personalities ensured that this hate-mongering stunt was kept in the forefront of international news coverage in the lead-up to the anniversary of modern history's best-known hate-mongering provocation. Even with the media support required to sustain hate in plain sight, today's background chatter suggests that those worried about U.S. national security are at work in the shadows to counter the influence of the Israel lobby. If so, that is good news for the United States. When Israeli-American writer Jeff Goldberg appeared again in the news, you knew psyops were underway. In March 2002, Goldberg published in The New Yorker a lengthy story alleging an alliance between the religious jihadists of Al-Qaeda and the secular Baathists of Iraq. Though a nonsensical premise, his account made such an alliance appear plausible to a public lacking in knowledge of the Middle East. Goldberg's storyline made it easier for Saddam Hussein to be portrayed as both an evildoer and a threat to the U.S. Goldberg's collaborator was James Woolsey, a former director of the CIA and an avid Zionist. Woolsey assured us that Iraqi intelligence officials met in Prague with Al-Qaeda. By association, his stature in intelligence lent credibility to phony intelligence fixed around an Israeli agenda.
The other day I was offered money to get information.
What sort of information?
Secret information.
Goldberg re-emerged in July to promote evildoer status for Iran. Writing in the July 22nd issue of The Atlantic, he argued the Israeli case for bombing Iran and urged that the U.S. again join the fray. No one in mainstream media mentioned his earlier manipulation. Based on the consistency of his journalism, it came as no surprise to see Goldberg re-emerge just in time for the 9th anniversary of 911. Aided by an army of false intelligence reported by a complicit media, that murderous provocation helped persuade the U.S. to invade Iraq to remove evildoer Saddam Hussein. That March 2003 agenda was first promoted in 1996 in A Clean Break, a strategy paper written for Benjamin Netanyahu by the Israeli-American team led by Richard Perle. This Jewish Zionist operative re-emerged in July 2001 to chair the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board, where he was joined by Woolsey and others supportive of this Israeli agenda. Fast forward to September 2010, and we find Goldberg back at work promoting his interview with Fidel Castro. Emerging fact patterns suggest it came as no surprise to our national security apparatus that the theme of his latest well-timed Goldberg article was the Cuban leader's concern that the Iranian president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is anti-Semitic. The timing of this report came as a surprise to those aware that Castro has long been critical of Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. Goldberg reports he was summoned to Havana to discuss Castro's fears of a global nuclear war. After conceding in an interview that the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't worth it, Castro turned to a theme of topical importance to Tel Aviv, insisting that the Iranian government must understand that the Jews were expelled from their land, persecuted and mistreated all over the world. Knowing Cuba's pre-revolution alliance with Meyer Lansky and other kingpins in Jewish organized crime, one must wonder if this journalist was dispatched to commence negotiations for gambling concessions as a means to fill the Castro's government's depleted coffers. The recent relaxation of restrictions on travel to Cuba may signal a pending return to Cuba's glory days as a nearby haven for organized crime. Castro's well-timed comments about persecuted Jews may have been a signal that Cuba is again open for business, any business. At the very least, his comments were like a healing balm to nationalist Zionist settlers who have plans to construct another 19,000 homes in the West Bank. So much for those who seek to quell Israel's long-running land dispute with the Palestinians in order to keep peace talks on track. Within 2 days of the release of the Goldberg interview, vandals in Sacramento, California, used a swastika to deface an image of Israeli basketball star Omri Caspi. The identity of the vandals has not been confirmed. This much has been confirmed. Timing is everything when seeking to sustain a storyline. Casting Castro as pro-Israeli was a stroke of genius. Here's where it starts to get interesting, as Americans wake up to find themselves unwitting combatants in the first real information age war. When waging modern-day warfare in the shared field of consciousness, media is routinely deployed to displace facts with false beliefs. Thus, the need for substantial and sustained influence in that domain by those determined to shape the political narrative. No one does that better than those who induce the world's greatest superpower to wage a war on their behalf. Recent developments suggest that the dynamics may be shifting in the field where political narratives are